You're listening to Big World Network.
He rescued fair maidens with the wave of his hand, and saved a princess or two. With a stomp of his foot he turned dragons to sand, and many a lass he did woo. These are the tales of the noble one, the slayer of things that are bad. He defeated foul sorcerers as he went, the tales of Myrick the magnificent.
Dragon Whisperer, Episode 1, Death, Destruction, and Other Cheery Thoughts. Written and read by Baron Stevens. I woke up when the floor moved beneath me, causing me to roll over onto my back. My head throbbed too. I opened my eyes to figure out what was happening. At first, it didn't help. I forced myself to sit up. Gradually, I could make out narrow beams of light coming from somewhere above me and the sound of water splashing against wood. How did I get on board a ship? I then remembered Duke Ralph activating the magical tourniquet he had placed around my neck. Oh, how I hated that thing. All Duke Ralph had to do was to send a thought, and it would tighten around my throat until I either passed out or died. It was made out of skin from his own thigh, which is why I decided to call it the Tourniquet of Grossness. But why hadn't he choked me to death? That was awfully nice of him, but it didn't make sense, especially after I had foiled his invasion plans. I scooted over next to the wall and leaned my head against it as I ran down the list of all my predicaments. First of all, I was imprisoned in a ship which I assumed belonged to the Nycphracians. They were the army sent here to take over my homeland, the 12 Kingdoms, under the command of Duke Ralph. And they had wanted to use me, due to my magic socks, as one of their battle mages to do their dirty work. Hence, the Tourniquet of Grossness. But the Nycphracians weren't my only problem. There was the issue of the Wizard High Council wanting me to pay them back dues to the order of 90 golds. And they wanted it within the next week. I only had 2 coppers to my name. They also wanted to cut my feet off, since my magic socks couldn't be removed normally, if I didn't pay them back. At least they would be nice enough to let me live. I hoped. Oh, and let's not forget the evil sorcerer Zern. Fortunately, he turned out to be less evil than the legend said, but he, too, wanted my socks. He claimed he needed them to save his own life due to all the damage he'd done to himself when he battled Lord Korak and the spirit of Arnabet. He promised he'd return my socks to me once he was done. Up to that point, he'd always kept his word to me, but I wasn't sure if I could trust him on this. He also claimed he could take them off me without the whole foot amputation thing. That was a plus. His health was rapidly declining, though, and with me heading away on a ship, it drastically increased the chance that he would die before I could return to save him. My scariest predicament, however, was that the girl who was determined to marry me had caught up to me in Imia. The only thing keeping me from being dragged to the altar at Arrow Point was the fact that I was on this ship in the middle of the ocean. So, are you caught up now? A hatch directly above me opened up, blinding me by the sudden burst of light from above. "On your feet," a harsh voice ordered. I tried to stand, but ended up falling back to the floor. 2 men, in the eye-nauseatingly colorful clothing typical of Nycphracians, leaped down and yanked me to my feet. They wore light green vests over orange shirts along with brown pants, their version of a soldier uniform. The 2 men dragged me up some stairs that had been folded down for us to climb. I had to keep my eyes mostly closed as they adjusted to the light of midday. By the time we reached the deck, I could sort of see enough to know I was surrounded by several Nycphracians with scimitars hanging from their belts. The soldiers carrying me stopped when we reached a man wearing pink pants with a purple vest over a yellow shirt. "Myrick, I trust you had a good rest," Duke Ralph said. He then nodded for one of the guards to remove my gag. Wonderful ship you have here, I said once my mouth was clear. The crew has been most kind and gentle with me, and the cuisine, fabulous. In reality, I wanted to puke. Duke Ralph laughed. I do have to admit that I like your attitude. You don't give up and you keep up your humor in spite of death looming over you. I decided to get right to the point. So, why haven't you killed me yet? He nodded and smiled. Good question. For one thing, I am a man of my word, and I did tell your fiancée that I would return you to her alive if you obeyed me. Just without my feet, I said, grimacing. That, young Myrick, is entirely up to you. But I did let your lovely Hermia free in order to help gain your trust. I really do need your help for my new plan to work. This is something, I'm afraid, that only you can do. Wonderful, I muttered. And what could that possibly be? Now, hear me out. I know we haven't started out on the best of terms, but I really do not mean you to come to any harm. While you were unconscious, my only remaining mage, Susan, did a magical exam to confirm what she suspected when she first saw you back in Imia. Oh? I asked. I shuddered when I thought about a stranger probing me with magic. And just how well are my kidneys functioning? Duke Ralph chuckled. Oh, they're doing just splendid. What Susan confirmed for me, though, is that you carry the aura of a dragon friend. I shook my head. Never heard of it. Of course, I was lying, but I didn't think it was a good idea for them to know that I could speak with dragons. Somehow, I gained the ability when I was bit by a little dragon named Pip while I was dragon-sitting him. I sure missed that cute little guy. He was just a tiny little thing who could curl up in the palm of my hand. Duke Ralph glared at me. You're lying. An instant later, panic swept through me as I writhed on the deck, struggling for air and consciousness. Just before I blacked out, the magical tourniquet around my neck released and allowed me to breathe again. I know you are a dragon friend, Duke Ralph said, so don't deny it again. I looked up at him and nodded. My throat wouldn't let me speak yet. Good. Now, this is what I need you to do. I need you to speak with some of the dragons in your homeland and convince them to join our cause. What? I choked out. I can't do that. Just because I can talk to them doesn't mean I can influence them. They don't like dealing with humans. So, your job is to convince them that they want to help us in our conquest of the world. They will be well rewarded. We are even willing to give them one of our continents to keep for themselves, where they won't be hunted and persecuted by us pesky humans. He smiled in a way that sent a chill up my spine. I sat up, shaking my head. Why should I do that? I don't want you taking over my country. And besides, even if I did succeed, I bet you would still cut my feet off or kill me to get my socks for yourself. I don't see anything here that will benefit me. Duke Ralph started pacing as he shook his head. I have been thinking about this. I will be honest and tell you that the thought of killing you and taking your anklets did occur to me. But I need your willing cooperation in order to get the dragons to join. So, here's my offer. If you succeed in enlisting the dragons, I'll let you keep the anklets of Arnabet and give you, say, 10,000 golds. That should make all your troubles go away. 10,000 golds? That would do more than make my troubles vanish. That would be enough for me to start my own kingdom. A smile started to spread across my face until I stopped it. Wait, how do I know you'll keep your word? Because I always do. You're still alive, aren't you? After all, I promised your betrothed that I wouldn't kill you unless you betrayed me again. I sat there, thinking over the offer. I had no proof that Duke Ralph always kept his word other than his, well, word. The whole deal still stank like dragon flatulence, but I didn't think I had any other options. I decided to voice my main concern. What if I don't comply? Duke Ralph frowned. Then I'm afraid your fiancée will be very upset when she learns that you are dead. Just as I thought. Was it worth dying, though, to keep the dragons from joining his army? And then there was the issue of actually convincing them to join. What if I try and fail? Failure isn't an option. That would be the same as disobeying. Cabbage, I swore under my breath. I looked out over the railing and saw a rocky shore in the distance. We were sailing south. Where are we headed? There is a dragon colony on an island south of Imia. We should be there in a day or so. That didn't give me much time to come up with a plan to escape. And I didn't know anything about the colony or any of the dragons there. If I were really to try to convince any dragons to join his conquest, I would have a better chance with the dragon colony I knew and loved. There's another one in northern Hatu, I said. I know the leader of that colony. She owes me a favor. If there's a dragon I might convince, it will be her. Duke Ralph stood there, steadying me. I can't tell if you are telling the truth or not. The tourniquet started to tighten. I am! I shouted. It immediately loosened back up. That seemed sincere. It was, really, I said. Duke Ralph nodded before turning around and saying, Captain Fred, turn us about and head north toward the country of Hatu. Yes, sir, said a man wearing black pants, a red sash, and a white shirt open down his chest. At least his clothes didn't make my eyeballs want to explode. But Fred? On top of Ralph, Dave, Susan, and Jimmy, these Nick Fratians had some really bizarre names. The good news was, I had bought myself a little more time to come up with a way out of this mess. It also gave me more time to figure out what to say to the Dragon Mother when we arrived. What could I say to convince her to go to war in order to save my scrawny, sorry little life? And should I even try?
He defeated foul sorcerers as he went. The tales of Myrick the Magnificent.
You're listening to Big World Network.